If you want to know how a picture can destroy a perfect life in less than a second, then keep listening. Like this video and subscribe to the channel right now, because this story is about to blow your mind. The silence in the penthouse was a lie. A beautiful, expensive lie. David stood in the middle of the spacious, minimalist living room in their Atlanta high-rise, the city lights of Buckhead twinkling a million miles below. He'd just returned from a last-minute business trip to Lagos, surprising his wife, Aisha, with his early arrival. He'd imagined a joyful reunion, a warm meal, maybe a quiet night in. Instead, he had walked into a ghost town. The lights were off, the bed was made, and there was a faint, cloying scent of a perfume he didn't recognize. Something sweet and cheap, a scent Aisha, with a refined taste, would never wear. He tried not to let the cold dread creep into his bones. He told himself it was nothing. Maybe she was out with her friends. Maybe she'd been shopping and was just on her way back. But his gut twisted. He went to her closet, a sprawling, organized space filled with designer clothes. All the clothes were there, and a quick glance at her vanity showed her expensive perfumes. But something fell off. His eyes fell on a small, elegant leather box on her dressing table, a box he'd gifted her for her birthday. It contained a delicate gold necklace. He opened it, and his blood ran cold. The necklace was gone. It was just a small piece of jewelry, but it had a deep personal significance. It was the necklace he'd bought on their first anniversary. It was a necklace she'd promised to always cherish. A new, gnawing feeling of suspicion started to consume him. He tried to brush it away, but he couldn't. He walked to his home office, a place where he spent countless hours building their empire. He sat down at his desk, his mind racing. He saw a small, crumpled piece of paper peeking out from under a stack of legal documents. He pulled it out, and his breath hitched. It was a dry cleaning receipt. A receipt from a hotel. Not just any hotel, but a luxury resort an hour north of the city. The date on the receipt was from last weekend. A weekend Aisha had told him she was visiting her sick aunt in South Carolina. A tremor started in his hands. He grabbed his phone and, his fingers fumbling, typed in her name. He pulled up their family photo gallery. He scrolled back to last weekend, to the photos she had sent him. Pictures of a hospital room, a frail-looking woman, and Aisha looking concerned. The hospital room looked convincing, but the background was a little too blurry. His mind, trained for detail in high-stakes finance, picked up the subtle inconsistencies. A specific type of window frame, the color of the bedspread. He did a quick reverse image search on one of the photos. His heart hammered in his chest. The images weren't from a hospital in South Carolina. They were stock photos. The dry cleaning receipt, the stolen necklace, the fake photos. The lies were stacking up. He felt a wave of nausea. He took a deep, shuddering breath and told himself to be calm. He was an investor, a CEO, a man who built empires. He would get to the bottom of this, logically and calmly. He picked up his iPad, a device he had also gifted her, and knew she rarely used. He'd set it up for her, so he knew the password. With trembling hands, he unlocked it. His eyes were immediately drawn to the text messages app. He saw a new chat, not with name, but with a number he didn't recognize. He clicked on it, and then he saw it. It wasn't a conversation. It was a single picture, a selfie. It was a picture of Aisha in a beautiful silk dress, laughing. Beside her, his arm wrapped around her, was a man who was not him. A man he knew all too well. It was Kwame, his best friend and business partner. The two men had built a financial empire together from the ground up, a company called Sterling Capital. Kwame was the godfather to their 7-year-old daughter, Zara. David stared at the picture, the laughter in Aisha's eyes and the smug smile on Kwame's face. The betrayal was so complete, so profound, it stole the air from his lungs. He felt a fire in his veins, but it was nothing compared to the cold, dead certainty that followed. He hadn't just been betrayed by his wife. He had been betrayed by both of them. And he saw something else in the picture, a detail that made his blood run cold. Lying on the table in front of them, barely visible, were financial documents with the Sterling Capital logo at the top. What happens next will shock you. What did David do when he realized the betrayal was more than just personal? Find out in the next chapter. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. He didn't scream. He didn't smash the iPad. He didn't even drop to his knees. The rage was a cold, quiet thing, a precise and terrifying clarity that settled over him. It wasn't the blind fury of a man betrayed, but the strategic calm of the CEO who just discovered a hostile takeover attempt. This wasn't just infidelity. This was a coup. The financial documents in the picture, the stolen necklace, the fake alibi, it all slotted into place. They weren't just having an affair. They were building a life together on the ruins of his. The emotional wound was deep, but the financial betrayal was an open surgical incision. He felt a deep, chilling stillness descend on him. He walked to the window and looked out over the glittering cityscape he'd helped build. Each light, each towering skyscraper felt like a silent witness to the destruction of his life. He was a billionaire, a titan of industry, but in this moment, he felt more vulnerable than ever before. He thought of his daughter, Zara, her innocent laugh, and the way she would run to him when he came home from a trip. The thought of Kwame, her godfather, her confidant, twisting that relationship for his own gain, was a poison that settled in his stomach. David went to his private study, a room protected by biometric locks and layered encryption. He sat at his mahogany desk, the very desk where he and Kwame had sketched out the blueprint for Sterling Capital on a cocktail napkin years ago. He started to work. He opened a secure financial program and began to dig, meticulously reviewing the company's accounts, looking for anything out of place. He wasn't looking for a single large transfer. He was looking for a pattern, a series of small, well-hidden transactions that would evade a casual audit. His focus was absolute. He wasn't David the broken husband anymore. He was David the CEO, the man who built an empire from nothing, and he was going to dismantle theirs just as easily. As he went deeper, he found the first clue, small, seemingly legitimate payments to a shell company. But the payments were structured oddly, just under the threshold that would require a detailed audit. He traced the shell company and found it was registered under a series of names, all fake, but linked to an address in a remote part of the city. He then cross-referenced that address with Kwame's private records. A shiver ran down his spine. It was a new company headquarters, a secret office Kwame had been building for months. He had been so blind, so trusting. He had given Kwame the keys to his kingdom and his family, and Kwame was using them to build his own. The discovery was a low, devastating blow. This wasn't a sudden crime of passion. This was a long-term, calculated plan. David felt a new, colder anger replace his initial shock. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. He needed proof. He needed to be one step ahead. He needed to find the smoking gun. He kept digging. He found emails he'd never seen before, encrypted messages between Kwame and Aisha, disguised as harmless business chatter. He decrypted them one by one, his hands shaking with a fury he had to keep in check. The words confirmed his worst fears. They were not just a couple, they were co-conspirators. They were planning to leverage her position as his wife to gain access to a larger share of the company's assets, then divorce him, leaving him with a fraction of his own wealth. He found it then, the final piece of the puzzle. An email from Kwame to Aisha, titled Final Prep. The body of the email was short and brutal. It's all set. Meet me at Sterling HQ tomorrow, 8 a.m. This is it. We're cutting him loose. You're the key to this whole thing. A PDF was attached, a presentation deck. David's hands trembled as he opened it. The title of the first slide read, in bold, stark lettering, Strategic Restructuring and Leadership Change, a New Vision for Sterling Capital. They weren't just going to take his money. They were going to steal his company, his legacy, and his reputation. And they were going to do it tomorrow morning, in front of the entire board. His wife and best friend are planning to take everything he's ever worked for. Will he be able to stop them? What will happen when David confronts his wife and business partner? Keep watching to find out what happens next. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more exclusive content. The city woke up outside, but David was still in the cold, desolate world of betrayal. He didn't sleep. He couldn't. He spent the night meticulously gathering digital evidence. The encrypted emails, the fake receipts, the financial transfers, even the metadata from the stock photos Aisha had sent. He compiled everything, not into a messy file, but into a clean, concise, and utterly damning legal brief. He was a man with a plan, a strategy for a war he never wanted to fight. He wasn't just going to confront them. He was going to destroy them. The betrayal was so deep that he was willing to lose everything just to make sure they lost more. He had to get to the office before them. He needed to set the stage for their downfall. At 5 a.m., as the first light bled over the Atlanta skyline, he was already dressed in his sharpest business suit. He felt no emotion, only a terrifying, focused calm. He called his head of security, a former federal agent he trusted implicitly. "I need you to be at Sterling Capital at 6 a.m. sharp," David said, his voice flat. "Bring 2 of your best men. This is a matter of corporate espionage. I have reason to believe we have a leak at the highest level." He didn't mention Kwame or Aisha. Not yet. He wasn't giving them a single piece of information they could use against him. At the office, the silence was absolute. David's security team, men he'd hired for their discretion and loyalty, were already there. He briefed them quickly. "We're going to set up a hidden camera in the main conference room and a listening device." David said, "I want everything recorded. Every word, every glance. And I want the main access to the company's servers rerouted to secure offshore backup. I want them to think they have control, but I'll be pulling the strings from here." He wanted them to walk into the trap he had so carefully laid for them. He wasn't going to just confront them. He was going to expose them to the entire world. When he was done setting up the surveillance, he went to his private office and waited. He had a screen displaying a live feed of the main conference room. At 7:55 a.m., he saw them, Aisha and Kwame, walking into the building together, laughing. They looked like a pair of triumphant conquerors. The sight of them together, so comfortable and so smug, was like a physical blow. But he didn't react. He watched them walk into the conference room, where the board members were beginning to gather. They started to set up the presentation. The same presentation he'd found on Aisha's iPad. He watched as they smiled, exchanged whispers, and then took their seats. He saw Aisha in a beautiful, confident dress take her place at the head of the table. He saw Kwame's arm casually rest on the back of her chair. David waited for the perfect moment. The meeting was called to order. Kwame started to speak, his voice calm and confident as he outlined his vision for the company. He talked about new leadership and strategic pivots. It was all a thinly veiled plan to force David out and take over. David waited until Kwame was at his most arrogant, his most self-assured. And then David walked in. The room went silent. The smiles on Aisha's and Kwame's faces froze. They looked at him, their eyes wide with shock and pure, unadulterated fear. They had not expected him to be here. They had not expected him to be so calm. They had not expected him to be armed with the kind of information that would not only destroy their plan, but their lives. "I believe you were just about to present your new vision for the company," David said, his voice a low, steady rumble that filled the room. "But it seems you've forgotten to include the most important part of the presentation." He held up his hand, and on the projector screen, a file opened. The title of the file was Evidence of Corporate Fraud and Spousal Betrayal. Aisha and Kwame's plan is now exposed. But what will they do when they realize David has everything on them? The game has just begun. What revenge will he take? Find out in the next chapter. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories. Kwame was the first to recover. His face, what had been pale with shock, now contorted into a mask of pure fury. "What is the meaning of this, David? Have you gone mad?" he sneered, his voice trembling slightly, betraying his carefully constructed facade. Aisha just stared, her mouth slightly agape, her eyes darting between David and the damning file title on the screen. The other board members, a mix of old allies and new faces, looked on in stunned silence, their expressions a blend of confusion and alarm. The tension was so thick you could almost taste it. David didn't answer Kwame. He just walked in front of the room, picked up the presentation remote, and with a single precise click, advanced the slide. The first page of the legal brief appeared on the screen, a list of bullet points detailing the small, Suspicious financial transactions, the dates, the amounts, and the names of shell companies. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The evidence spoke for itself. He watched as the blood drained from Kwame's face, and Aisha's hand went to her mouth. He saw them exchange a frantic, terrified look, a silent agreement to deny everything. "This is a fabricated document," Kwame stammered, his voice losing all its earlier confidence. "This is slander. David, you're not well. You just got back from a trip, and you're making up insane accusations." He tried to turn to the board, but David held up a hand. "Let's move on to the next slide, shall we?" he said, his voice as cold and sharp as a shard of glass. He clicked again. The next slide showed the encrypted emails, now fully decrypted and translated into plain text. He displayed a particularly damning one, a message from Aisha to Kwame, discussing the timing of David's business trip and the logistics of their takeover. "He's just left for Lagos. The coast is clear. Let's move on this before he gets back." The date and time stamp were clear for everyone to see. Aisha finally found her voice, a desperate, thin whisper. "David, please, this is what it looks like." David laughed, a short, humorless sound that echoed in the silent room. "It's exactly what it looks like, Aisha. It looks like you and my best friend, the godfather of my daughter, have been plotting to steal my company and my life. It looks like betrayal on a scale that is truly magnificent." The board members, now fully aware of the drama unfolding, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. David didn't care about their opinions. He cared about his revenge. He walked ahead of the table, stood directly in front of Aisha and Kwame, and placed his hands on the polished mahogany. "You two thought you had me cornered," he said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing growl. "You thought you had a clear path to my money, my business, my everything. But you forgot one thing. I'm not just the CEO. I'm the one who built this company, brick by brick. You've been planning for months, but I've been building for a decade." He then looked directly at Kwame. "You were going to take my company. But what you didn't know is that the assets you think you're getting are tied up in a series of offshore trusts. If you try to force me out, the company will go bankrupt overnight, and you will both be left with nothing but the legal fees from a very long, very public fight." He pulled out his phone and made a single phone call, placing it on speaker for the entire room to hear. A deep, gruff voice answered. "This is a prearranged call," David said, his eyes never leaving Kwame's. "Initiate the transfer of all company assets to the holding account, the one we discussed. Do it now." David has set a plan in motion to destroy them all. But is it a bluff? Will they fall for it? What will Aisha and Kwame do to stop him from destroying the company and their lives? Find out in the next chapter. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more mind-blowing stories. The silence that followed David's call was different. It wasn't the shocked silence from before, but a tense, panicked quiet. The board members, once quiet spectators, were now a flurry of whispered conversations. Their faces, once curious, were now filled with fear. David's bluff had worked. Or was it a bluff? The call he just made was real, but the command was a calculated risk. He was counting on their greed to make them believe it was real. He watched as the color drained from Kwame's face. He knew his friend was smart enough to know what that meant. A holding account wasn't just a place to park cash. It was a black hole for assets, a place where a company could go to die. Aisha, on the other hand, went from stunned to seething. She lunged forward, grabbing a tablet from the table. "You can't do this, David," she screamed, her voice cracking. "This company is half mine. We built this together." David just looked at her, his expression a cold mass of indifference. "You made your choice, Aisha. You chose Kwame. You chose to try and steal from me. Now you get to live with the consequences." He looked at Kwame, who had started sweating profusely. "And you, Kwame, you get to be the CEO of a bankrupt company. I'm sure that's a title you've always wanted." The board members, a group of powerful men and women who had built their reputations on calculated risk, saw the writing on the wall. They looked at David, then at Kwame and Aisha. David was a master strategist, a man who had built their wealth. Kwame and Aisha were a couple of thieves who had just been caught. One of the board members, a respected old man named Mr. Morgan, stood up. "David, I think we should suspend this meeting immediately, he said, his voice calm. This is a legal matter now. I suggest we all retain counsel. David nodded, a ghostly smile on his lips. I already have, Mr. Morgan. I suggest you do the same. As the board members filed out, leaving Aisha, Kwame, and David alone, the room felt impossibly small. The air was thick with the residue of their ruined plan. Aisha, her face streaked with tears, turned to David. What do you want, David? You've exposed us. You've humiliated us. What more do you want? He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw a glimmer of the man she had married, the man who was capable of great love and great fury. I want you to leave, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I want you out of my life, and out of my daughter's. I want you to tell the world what you did. I want a divorce, and I'm taking everything. He looked at Kwame, who was still staring at the projector screen, as if it were a specter. And you, Kwame, I want your resignation, effective immediately. I want you out of this company, and I want you to stay away from my family. Kwame finally looked up, his eyes meeting David's. There was no anger, only a deep, abiding fear. You're bluffing, David, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. The assets aren't gone. You just can't bring yourself to destroy everything we built. David's phone chimed with a new message. He held it up for Kwame to see. It was a confirmation from his legal team. All assets had been moved, and a temporary injunction had been filed to freeze any counter movements. The bluff wasn't a bluff. David had just destroyed the company he had built. He had chosen revenge over his empire. And now, he had to go home and face the one person who had been his only solace in all of this, his daughter, Zara. He wondered if she could see the cold, broken man he had become. He sacrificed his entire company for revenge. But what will happen when he realizes his daughter is caught in the middle of it all? What will be the next move in this high-stakes game? Find out in the next chapter. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. The ride home was a blur of traffic and silent, internal devastation. David felt a strange emptiness, a void where his fury had been. He'd won the battle, but at what cost? He had destroyed his company, a part of his identity. He had betrayed the very foundation of his life. As the car pulled up to the security gate of their exclusive neighborhood, he saw his daughter, Zara, in the front yard. She was drawing on the sidewalk with colored chalk, her braids tied up with bright pink ribbons. Seeing her, so innocent and happy, made the weight of his actions feel unbearable. He walked to the front door, his heart heavy. He opened it and was greeted by the sight of Aisha, standing in the foyer. Her face was a mess of smeared makeup and furious tears. She had rushed home after the meeting, a desperate attempt to salvage something from the ruins. "How could you do this?" she screamed, her voice hoarse with rage. "You ruined us. You ruined our lives." David just stared at her, the woman he had once loved more than life itself, the woman who had just tried to steal his life. "I didn't ruin us, Aisha. You and Kwame did that. You broke your vows. You tried to steal everything from me." He walked past her, his eyes scanning the living room, the space that had once felt so warm and inviting but now felt cold and empty. He saw the pictures on the wall, the wedding photos, the family portraits. They all seemed to mock him, the perfect smiles and the promises of a life that was now shattered. He went to study, to the secure server, and with a few clicks, he sent all the evidence to his lawyers and a copy to a news agency he had an arrangement with, a major media outlet that specialized in corporate scandals. He wanted to make sure his story was told before Aisha and Kwame could spin their own lies. He knew what he had to do next. He had to tell Zara. He had to explain to her why her godfather was a bad man and why her mother was leaving. He had to be the one to break her heart. He saw her through the window, still drawing on the sidewalk, a small, vibrant splash of color in a world that had suddenly become gray. He walked outside, the cool evening air a stark contrast of burning in his chest. "Zara," he said, his voice softer than it had been all day, "can we talk?" She looked up, her innocent eyes full of joy, and that's when he saw it. The drawing on the sidewalk wasn't a house or a family. It was of a car, a fancy sports car, a car that looked exactly like Kwame's. "I miss Uncle Kwame," she said, her voice small and sad. He promised to take me for a ride, but he never came. David felt his heart crumble. He had thought the betrayal was only about money and love, but it was about something far more precious, his daughter's love and trust. He realized the most painful part of this betrayal wasn't the public humiliation or the financial loss. It was seeing the emotional manipulation of his daughter. It was knowing that Kwame had not only stolen his wife and his company, but had also preyed on the love of his child. David felt a new kind of resolve, one that was even more terrifying than his earlier fury. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about protecting his daughter. David's daughter is caught in the middle of this mess. What will he do when he realizes Aisha and Kwame have been using her as a pawn in their game? Will David's revenge become even more brutal and personal? The stakes just got higher. Don't miss the next chapter. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more exclusive content. Aisha watched him, a silent specter in the doorway, as he walked outside to their daughter. She saw the way his shoulders, which had been so straight and unyielding in the boardroom, now slumped with a weight she knew nothing about. The rage that had been a burning fire inside her now turned into a cold, hollow fear. She had gambled everything, and she had lost. The life of luxury, the social status, the perfect image she had so carefully curated. It was all gone. She looked at the media notifications, lighting up her phone screen. The story was already out. The world knew she was a liar and a cheat. She had fallen from grace, and there was no coming back. As David knelt down beside Zara, Aisha felt a sudden, sharp pang of something she hadn't felt in a long time: shame. She had used her daughter as a pawn in a game of emotional manipulation and financial power plays. Kwame had manipulated Zara's affection, promising her things he would never deliver on, just to get closer to Aisha. Aisha had allowed it, turning a blind eye to her daughter's broken trust, all for the promise of a life that was a lie. She watched David, the man she had betrayed, try to explain a complex and heartbreaking reality to their innocent child. She knew he would be kind, that he would protect Zara, and in that moment, she realized David wasn't the monster she had painted him out to be. She was, "What is it, Daddy?" Zara asked, her small voice cutting through the tension. "You look sad." David took a deep breath. "Zara," he began, his voice low and steady, "I need to tell you something important. It's about me and Mommy and Uncle Kwame." He explained everything in the simplest terms he could muster. He didn't use big words like betrayal or infidelity or corporate fraud. He used words a 7-year-old could understand. Sometimes, when people you trust tell you a story, it's not the whole story. Uncle Kwame and Mommy were playing a game, and they broke some important rules. They forgot that the most important thing is our family. So now, they can't play with us anymore. Zara's face crumpled. A single tear rolled down her cheek. "But I love Uncle Kwame," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He's my best friend." David's heart ached. This was the consequence he hadn't foreseen, the one that hit him the hardest. He hadn't just exposed Kwame. He had exposed a person his daughter loved and trusted. He hugged her close, his arms a safe harbor in the storm. "I know, baby. I know it hurts. But sometimes people make bad choices. And when they do, you have to be strong enough to stand up for what's right." He looked up, and his eyes met Aisha's through the window. There was no anger there, only a deep, heartbreaking sadness. He had won the war, but the emotional casualties were mounting. Just then his phone rang. It was his lawyer. "David, I have something you need to know," his lawyer's voice said, his tone urgent. "It's about Aisha's family. Her father, the minister, he's a key investor in the new company Kwame was setting up. They were going to use your assets to fund the entire thing, with him as a silent partner." David's blood ran cold. His wife's own father had been a part of the betrayal. He had been so focused on Aisha and Kwame. He hadn't seen the other players in the game. The truth was worse than he could have ever imagined. David's world has just been turned upside down again. His own father-in-law was a part of conspiracy. What will David do now that he knows his betrayal runs even deeper? The stakes have never been higher. Find out in the next chapter. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. The revelation hit David with the force of a physical blow. The betrayal wasn't a triangle. It was a full-blown conspiracy, a family affair orchestrated by the very man he had once sought advice from. He stood there, holding his daughter, his mind racing. The minister, a man who preached about integrity and family values, had been plotting to steal from him. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. He had been so close to winning, to walking away with his dignity intact. But now he was back in the ring, facing an enemy he never saw coming. He handed Zara to her nanny, his face a mask of stone. "Take her inside," he said, his voice flat. "I need a moment." He walked into his study, the room now a command center for a war he never wanted to fight. He couldn't just sue Kwame and Aisha anymore. He had to take down the entire family. He had to expose them all. He called his lawyer back, his voice low and dangerous. "I want everything on Aisha's father, Minister Ajayi. Every single financial document, every property record, every bank account. I want you to find his offshore accounts, his dirty dealings, everything." His lawyer, who had worked with him for years, knew that tone. It was the tone of a man who had nothing left to lose. Meanwhile, a storm was brewing in the Ajayi household. Minister Ajayi was furious. He had just received a panic call from Aisha, who had told him that David had exposed their plan, that the company was now worthless, and that his investment was gone. "How could you be so careless, Aisha?" he bellowed into the phone, his voice shaking with a rage that was far from holy. "I told you to be patient, to wait for the right time. Now everything is gone." Aisha, sobbing, tried to explain. "He just came back, Daddy. We didn't expect him. He had everything on us." Minister Ajayi hung up the phone. The carefully constructed life he had built, a life of power, influence, and wealth, was now at risk. He had used his position as a man of God to manipulate people, to build a secret financial empire. He had used his daughter as a means to an end. Now David, the man he had once considered son, was going to expose him. He couldn't let that happen. He had to stop David by any means necessary. He had to neutralize the threat, and he had to do it fast. He picked up his phone and made a call to a man he knew, a man who didn't work in church, but in the shadows. "I need a problem solved," he said, his voice a low, chilling whisper. "A permanent problem." David was still in his study, poring over the documents he had on his father-in-law, when his phone chimed. It was a message from an unknown number. He opened it, and his heart nearly stopped. It was a picture of Zara, a candid photo of her drawing on the sidewalk with chalk, a picture taken just minutes ago. The text below it read, "We know where she is. This is just the beginning. Back off, or the game gets personal." David's hands began to shake with a new kind of terror, a fear that was colder and more debilitating than anything he had ever known. The game was no longer about money or revenge. It was about his daughter's life. The conspiracy runs deeper than David could have ever imagined, and now his daughter's life is at risk. What will a desperate and cornered Minister Ajayi do next to silence David? Find out in the next chapter. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more exclusive content. The terror was a living, breathing thing. It was a cold serpent that coiled around David's heart, squeezing the air from his lungs. For all his planning, all his meticulous revenge, he had never considered this. He had been so focused on destroying their financial empire that he had left his most precious asset, his daughter, completely exposed. He felt a wave of self-loathing so profound it nearly brought him to his knees. He had been so blinded by his rage that he had forgotten what truly mattered. He sprang into action, his mind, once so calm and strategic, now a whirlwind of panic. He ran to the intercom, his voice a strained whisper as he called the nanny. "Where is Zara? Is she safe? Is she with you?" The nanny's calm voice on the other end was a small comfort. "Yes, sir. She's in her room, playing with her dolls. She's fine." David let out a shaky breath. He didn't realize he was holding. But the threat was real. The picture proved it. Minister Ajayi was not just a greedy man. He was a dangerous man. He had just raised the stakes to a level David was not prepared to play. He immediately called his head of security. "I want a full perimeter lockdown of the entire property," he said, his voice a low, urgent growl. Every gate, every window. I want 2 men in the house with me, and 2 on the perimeter, and I want the police on their way. Now, the security head, a man who had seen it all, didn't question David's tone. He simply said, "On it, sir," and hung up. David went to Zara's room, a brightly colored space filled with toys and laughter. He saw her, kneeling on the floor, arranging a tea party for her dolls. Her innocence was a sharp, painful contrast to the dark world he had just entered. He knelt beside her, pretending to play, his eyes constantly scanning the windows, his ears straining for any sound. Meanwhile, Minister Ajayi was in a state of control panic. He had to be. He had a reputation to protect, a church to run. He couldn't be seen as a desperate man. He called Kwame. "What happened with David?" he demanded, his voice a low, chilling whisper. "He's just called the police," Kwame stammered. "He's gone crazy. He's talking about corporate fraud and bringing the whole thing down. I think he knows everything." Ajayi's face, usually a picture of serene composure, hardened. "Then you were a fool, Kwame. You underestimated him. You left a trail of breadcrumbs for him to follow, and now we are all going to pay the price. You have to handle this. Now." Kwame, terrified, realized the full extent of the hole he had dug for himself. He had betrayed his best friend for a woman he thought he loved, and now he was caught between a furious David and a menacing minister. Back at the house, David was still trying to process everything. The police had arrived and were securing the perimeter. His lawyers had just informed him that they had found a paper trail linking Minister Ajayi to a series of shady deals in a different country. The case against them was airtight. But the new threat, the one against his daughter, had changed everything. He couldn't just expose them. He had to protect her. The thought of losing her, of seeing her caught in the crossfire as revenge, was a fire that burned away every last bit of anger and left it with nothing but a cold, hard determination. He would protect her at all costs. Just then, he heard a new sound, a faint, rhythmic tapping at his front door. He looked at the intercom. No one was there. He then looked at the front door. He saw the smallest figure he'd ever seen standing there, a small, scared-looking homeless girl, holding a bag of his daughter's favorite chalk. What does a homeless girl have to do with David and his daughter? What will happen when David realizes the real mastermind behind the plot is a person he'd never even thought to suspect? The story is about to take an even more dramatic turn. Find out in the next chapter. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. The homeless girl's small, shivering figure was an unexpected puzzle in David's meticulously planned world of revenge. The police had already secured the perimeter, and 2 of his security team were in the house with him, but he couldn't shake the sight of this girl at his doorstep. He felt a strange pull, a sense that this was not a coincidence. He walked to the door, his hand on the knob, but stopped. He was a CEO, a man of power, but his fear was a raw, primal thing. He turned to one of the security guards. "See what she wants," he said, his voice low. The guard, a tall, burly man, nodded and walked to the door, a hand on the gun holstered at his hip. The girl didn't run. She just stood there, her eyes wide, her small, dirty hand clutching the bag of chalk. The guard opened the door, and she held out the bag. I think this belongs to the little girl," she said, her voice a reedy whisper. "I saw her drop it. I just wanted to give it back." The guard, surprised, took the bag and closed the door. David, watching from a distance, felt a new wave of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Shame. Here he was, a man with everything, terrified of a small, defenseless girl, while he had been so blind to betrayal those closest to him. He took the bag of chalk, the small, colorful sticks of innocence, a stark reminder of the world he was fighting for. He felt a new kind of resolve, one that was not born of anger or greed, but a quiet, unyielding love for his daughter. He realized that the greatest power was not in destroying others, but in protecting what was his. He knew he had to stop the fight, not because he was scared, but because he had to protect Zara. He couldn't let her be a pawn in a game of revenge. He turned to his security guard. "I want you to take that girl to a hotel. A nice one. I want her to have a warm bath, a hot meal, and a new set of clothes. I want her to have whatever she needs. and I want you to keep her safe. She's a witness." The guard nodded, a look of respect on his face. David knew that this was the right thing to do. He wasn't just fighting for his empire anymore. He was fighting for his daughter, for her innocence, and for a world that was just and fair. Just then his phone rang. It was an unknown number. He took a deep breath and answered it. "David," a voice said, "it's Kwame. I'm calling to tell you that you've won. Minister Ajayi has a file on you, something he's been saving. If you don't back down, he'll release it. It's something that will destroy your reputation and send you to jail. I'm out of the game, David. I just wanted to give you a warning." The call ended. David felt a new kind of terror. What could Minister Ajayi have on him? What could be so terrible that it would make him lose everything? He knew the answer was out there, in a world of secrets and lies he had only just scratched the surface of. He looked at the bag of chalk, the symbol of his daughter's innocence, and he knew he had to find the truth, no matter the cost. The game has just been turned on its head. David's revenge has brought him face to face with a secret that could destroy his life. What does Minister Ajayi know? The final chapter will reveal everything. You don't want to miss it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. The warning from Kwame had sent a fresh wave of terror through David, but it was quickly replaced by a cold, sharp logic. There was only one person who could possibly know Minister Ajayi's deepest secrets: the homeless girl. He had to get to her before anyone else did. He rushed the security team, his voice low and urgent. "What is the name of the girl? Where did you take her?" The guard, a veteran of countless high-stakes situations, gave him the name of the hotel and the room number. He didn't ask questions. He just knew. David arrived at the hotel, a sleek, modern building in the heart of Atlanta. He walked through the lobby, his eyes scanning every face. He didn't want to be seen. He took the elevator to the room and knocked softly. The door opened to reveal the homeless girl, her eyes wide with fear. She was wearing a clean set of clothes, and the scent of a fresh shower filled the air. She was a different person. "I know this is a strange question," David said, his voice low and calm. "But did you find anything else when you found my daughter's chalk?" The girl's eyes widened. She slowly reached into her bag and pulled out a small metallic flash drive. It was a dark and unassuming object, but David knew in his gut that it was a key to everything. "My mother gave me this," she said, her voice a reedy whisper. "She said it was our family's secret. She said it was proof of what he did." David looked at the girl, his heart pounding in his chest. "Your mother?" he asked. The girl nodded. "He's my father, Minister Ajayi." A new wave of shock hit David. It all made sense now. The minister's betrayal wasn't just about money or greed. It was about a family he had abandoned, a past he had tried to erase. The girl, Grace, was a living proof of his hypocrisy. Grace explained everything. Her mother, Minister Ajayi's secret mistress, was a financial advisor. She had helped him build his empire, but when she discovered his plan to embezzle money from the church's charities and frame an associate, she tried to stop him. He had her blacklisted from the financial industry, and she was forced to live in poverty, all while he lived a life of luxury. She had created the flash drive as an insurance policy, a way to expose him if he ever came for her or her daughter. She had been searching for an honest person to give it to. She had been searching for a man who cared more about justice than money. She had been searching for David. David looked at the flash drive in his hand. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. He was not just fighting for his own family. He was fighting for Grace and her mother. He was fighting for all the people Minister Ajayi had wronged. He knew exactly what he had to do. He went to his home office, with Grace by his side, and opened the flash drive. The files were all there: bank statements, offshore accounts, wire transfers, all meticulously detailed and signed with Minister Ajayi's name. David had everything he needed to destroy not just the minister's reputation, but his entire life. David called his lawyer and sent him the flash drive, telling him to release all the information to the press. Then he went to Minister Ajayi's house. The minister opened the door, his face a mask of smug arrogance. "David, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice filled with a condescending tone. "I've come for Zara," David said. "And for you." Minister Ajayi laughed. You're a fool, David. I have a file on you that will ruin you. I told you this is a game you can't win. David just smiled. There's something you should know about that file, he said. It's a fake. The real one is in the hands of the media right now, and it has everything on you. The minister's face went white. David then walked away, a sense of peace washing over him as he saw the fear in the minister's eyes. David has won. He's exposed a web of deceit that was bigger and more insidious than he could have ever imagined. The game is over, and he's not just a billionaire who lost everything. He's a hero who gained everything. What did he do next? He started a new life, a life of peace and love with his daughter and with Grace by their side. He taught his daughter that the greatest revenge is not in destroying others, but in living a life of truth and justice. The end. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories.